Tonight has a weight, you know. It is not the weight of bad news, it is not the weight of an argument. It is not anything someone from the outside could point to with a finger. It is the weight of a house that grew quiet too early, and of a person who looks around and realizes that at some point during the day, no one really asked how they were doing. Not, how are you in passing, out of routine, out of politeness. How are you really doing? If right now you're feeling that absence because you were with people today, maybe even with family, but left with a strange feeling in your chest that is hard to name, stay with me. This prayer is for you. There is a kind of loneliness the world hardly recognizes because it does not look like loneliness. You are not alone in a locked room. You took part in conversations. You answered messages. Maybe you even smiled a lot today. But at some point during the day, while everyone was talking, while plans were being made, while the lives of the people around you kept spinning with their usual urgency, you felt something very specific. You felt like you were one step behind glass, present, physically visible but not reached, as if there were a thin, transparent layer between you and the center of things, and no one around you seemed to notice, and you did not quite know how to explain it. Maybe it was during the phone call with your son, that call that lasted 7 minutes and was entirely about his schedule, his problems, his rush. You listened, asked questions, cared, and when you hung up, you held the phone in your hand for a second thinking, he did not ask anything about me. Not out of cruelty, he loves you, you know that. But love and attention are different things, and that difference hurts in a way you're not even sure you have the right to feel. Or maybe it was in the family group chat, that group where messages come fast, emojis, photos of the grandchildren, weekend plans, and you read everything, answered lovingly, sent the heart emoji. But inside, quietly, there was a question that fit in none of the messages. Does anyone here wonder how I'm spending my days? That question is ashamed to exist, because over the course of decades, you learned that the person who asks too much about themselves is a burden, that the caregiver does not complain, that fathers and mothers hold things together, that in your generation feelings are not brought to the table unless you are sure they are urgent enough to deserve attention, and so you learned not to ask, not to mention it, to swallow that second of silence after the call and keep going, because keeping going is what you do. But tonight, just for a few minutes, you do not have to keep going. You can stay right here where you are, with this strange feeling in your chest, with the sense that the day was long not because of what happened, but because of what did not happen, because of the question no one asked, the space no one opened, the moment when someone could have stopped and said, "Tell me how you are really doing. This is real, this hurts, and it deserves to be treated as the pain it is." For a few minutes, you do not have to minimize this. You do not have to tell yourself it is silly, that other people have bigger problems, that you should be more grateful. You can just be here, with this, without fixing it. Because in a moment, I want to pray with you. Not with quick words of comfort, but with honesty, the way someone prays when they sit beside you and understand exactly that specific strange feeling of feeling invisible among the people you love most. And I want that when this prayer ends, you close your eyes knowing that someone saw this night with you. Not just anyone. The one who exists before any family group chat, before any 7-minute phone call, before any formality of politeness. The only one who does not need to be reminded to ask. The only one for whom you are never a burden. Stay with me. There is a moment in the book of Luke, chapter 13, that almost goes unnoticed. It is not one of the most famous stories. There is no sea parting, no resurrection, no crowd of 5,000 people. It is a small, almost intimate encounter in a synagogue on an ordinary Sabbath afternoon. Jesus was teaching, and there was a woman there. The text says she had been carrying an illness for 18 years. 18 years with her body bent over, unable to stand up straight. 18 years entering every place like that, bent over, looking at the ground, unable to lift her face to see who was in front of her. Think about what that means beyond the physical. 18 years in which people saw her from above. 18 years in which she had to make an effort to look into someone's eyes. 18 years entering the synagogue, the place where everyone is supposed to be seen by God, in a posture the world involuntarily reads as diminished, as smaller. as someone who is, literally, one step below everyone else. And the text does not say she cried out. It does not say she went to Jesus, that she threw herself at his feet, that she did anything to attract attention. It simply says that she was there, present, in the synagogue, on an ordinary Sabbath. It was Jesus who saw her. Luke 13, verse 12. But when Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said to her, "Woman, you are loosed from your infirmity." Let that sequence settle for a moment, because it has a very specific order that matters immensely to the night you are living right now. First, Jesus saw her, not she went to him, not she asked, not she introduced herself, explained the situation, made the case for why she deserved attention. He was teaching, there were other people there, there was speech, there was movement, and at some point his eyes went directly to her and stayed there. Second, he called her. He did not send a message through someone else. He did not wave from a distance. He called her, the way you call someone close, the way you do when you want the person to know that the approach is intentional, that the encounter was not an accident. Third, he spoke directly to her. Woman. Not that one over there. Not a generic pronoun for someone being treated like a case. A direct address. Words that could only be for her, and that she knew, while hearing them, had reached the right place inside her chest. That is what happens when someone truly sees you. Not notices you, truly sees you. There is a huge difference between those two things. To notice is to register that someone exists. To see is to stop, focus, recognize the specific person who is there, with the story they carry, with the weight they brought, with the bent posture that 18 years of pain left on body and soul. Jesus did not merely notice that woman, he saw her. And now I want you to think about something you may not have thought of this way before. The emotional loneliness you carry, that feeling of being present but not really reached, of speaking but not being truly heard, of being in a group and still feeling that the deepest part of who you are is not being seen. That loneliness comes with a lie it whispers along with it. The lie says, if the people around you are not seeing, it is because there is not much to see. It is subtle. It does not come as a direct accusation. It comes disguised as a logical conclusion, as if invisibility were evidence of value, as if the fact that no one asks were proof that there is not much to ask, as if decades of life lived, of love given, of wisdom gathered in difficult places, as if all of that were not interesting enough to deserve anyone's attention. That logic does not come from God. It never has. That woman in the synagogue had been bent over for 18 years. The text does not say she was famous, that she had influence, that she had done something extraordinary that made her a candidate for Jesus' attention. She was simply there, with the weight of 18 years on her back, with the posture pain had given her body on an ordinary Sabbath among other people. And she was exactly the one Jesus saw first. Not the scribes, not the religious leaders who knew the scriptures by heart, not the disciples who were closer, the bent-over woman in the corner who had asked for nothing. It is as if God were saying to your heart tonight, I do not need you to introduce yourself. I do not need you to make enough noise to be noticed. I do not need someone to remind me about you. I am already looking. There is a phrase later in this passage that touches me deeply. When the ruler of the synagogue became indignant about the healing, because it was the Sabbath, because there were rules, because a protocol had been broken, Jesus answered by calling that woman a daughter of Abraham. Daughter of Abraham. In the cultural context of that time, that was a statement of belonging, of inheritance, of deep identity. It was not polite praise. It was a public recognition of who she was, not because of what she had done, not because of the position she held, not because of the bent posture or the disease or the 18 years of weight she carried, because of who she was inside, because of the story she had with God, because of the name she already had before any pain had arrived. Jesus did not see her as a sick woman. He saw her as the daughter of Abraham, who at that moment was bent over. There is a huge difference between those two things. One is identity defined by limitation. The other is limitation present within an identity that has not changed. And that speaks directly to you tonight. Because emotional loneliness tries to do exactly what that bent posture did. It tries to make you define yourself by the posture pain gave you. It tries to make you see yourself as the father whose children do not call much, the mother who stays waiting for messages, the person one step behind glass. It tries to turn pain into identity, but God does not see you that way. He sees what is underneath the bent posture. He sees the story you carry, not as weight but as depth. He sees decades of love given, of sacrifices made in silence, of faith built in the fire of situations that no one around you tonight knows you went through. He sees the person who existed before loneliness arrived and who still exists inside it. Daughter of Abraham, son of Abraham, that is how he calls you, not by the state in which you arrived tonight, by the name you have before him, the name that does not change when your children's schedules get too full, when calls get shorter, when the day ends with that strange feeling in the chest of someone who was present but not really reached. This text was written many centuries ago, in a synagogue that no longer exists, about a woman whose name is not even mentioned. And still it falls with surgical precision into this night, because the God who stopped everything to see that woman on an ordinary Sabbath is the same God who is in this room now, looking at you, not in a formal way, not because it is his function, with the same specific unmistakable attention of someone who crossed a crowded room to call someone by name, because that person at that moment mattered more than anything else that was happening. You matter that way to him. Tonight, with everything you carry, with the bent posture emotional loneliness has left, that posture of someone who learned not to ask, not to take up space, to swallow the second of silence after the call and keep going. He sees you beneath all of that. And what he sees is not someone who does not deserve attention. Let me enter this pain with you in a more concrete way. There is a scene I imagine you know. It is not dramatic. It never is. It is small, almost trivial, and perhaps that is exactly why it hurts more than it should. It is the end of a phone call. You were waiting for that call, maybe all day, not anxiously, not counting the minutes, but there was a quiet expectation there, the kind of expectation we do not even admit to ourselves because it feels like too much. The phone rang. You answered with the lightness of someone trying not to seem like they had been waiting, and the conversation was good. He laughed. She talked about the children. You listened to everything, asked about the details, genuinely cared about each thing that was said. And then came that phrase, "Well, I'll let you get some rest." You said that was fine, that it was good to talk, to take care. You hung up, and you kept looking at the phone for a few seconds, not because anything bad happened. The call was good, but there was something you wanted to say and did not. Or rather, there was something you wanted someone to ask and no one asked. How your week had been, how you have been sleeping, whether that pain in your knee got better, whether you are really doing well, beyond the "I'm fine" that comes out automatically before you even think. You put the phone away and went to do something else, because that is what you do. But that feeling stayed, that small space the size of a question that never came. And there is another scene, perhaps even quieter. It is when you are somewhere with people, a family lunch, a church gathering, dinner with neighbors, and the conversation is lively, the noise is good, everyone seems to be doing well. And you are there participating, smiling at the right times, contributing when there is room. But at some point, without warning, you realize that you are observing more than participating, not for lack of something to say. Because of a distance you did not put there on purpose. It is like watching a show you already know well. You know the characters, you know the topics, you know where the conversation is going. But the feeling of being inside it, of being a central part of it, of being the person who made the scene different, that feeling has become rarer than it used to be. And you do not really know when that changed. Do I get boring when I talk about my own things? That thought appears, quietly, without drama, but it appears. Maybe they have heard these stories before. Maybe this is not the right moment. Maybe I'm exaggerating what I feel. And then you keep it again, because you learned to keep it. Because in decades of life, you were the person who held things together, who listened, who made space for others. And at some point that became such a deep habit that you hardly notice anymore when you are doing it to your own heart. I need to say something about that firmly because it is too important to gloss over. Keeping it in is not a virtue when it turns into invisibility. Always listening and never being heard is not humility. It is a form of loneliness that was slowly normalized, so slowly that you did not even notice it was happening. And there is a specific lie that this emotional loneliness carries with it, different from the others I already mentioned. It is not the lie that you have no value, it is more subtle than that. It is the lie that your inner story, what you think, what you feel, what you carry, what you learned over decades of life, truly lived, is no longer interesting to anyone. That the world has already moved on to other conversations. That the younger people around you have their own dramas, their own urgencies, and there is no real space for what you have to say. That maybe you yourself no longer have that much to say. That all the stories have been told, that experience no longer has many places to land. That is a lie. Cruel, persistent, completely false. Think about that bent-over woman in the synagogue. For 18 years she had entered that same space. 18 Sabbaths a year, the same place, the same people, the same bent posture everyone had already gotten used to seeing. At some point, people stopped truly looking at what they always see. She had become part of the scenery. But Jesus had not seen her before, and when he saw her, it was as if it were the first time, with all the attention, all the focus, all the specificity of someone meeting a person for the first time and discovering that she is exactly who he needed to meet at that moment. God does not get used to you. He does not have that fatigue of someone who has heard the same stories many times. He does not have that distraction of someone whose mind is elsewhere while you speak. He does not have that hurry of someone who needs to hang up quickly because they have other things to do. Every time you come before him with the same fears, the same pains, the same questions that return, he listens as if it were the first time, because for him, in a certain way, it is. God's attention does not wear out. It does not divide. It does not diminish with repetition. You do not need to have a new story, a new problem, a dramatic enough crisis to deserve that he stop everything and look. You only need to be there, as that woman was, just present, in the right place, on an ordinary Sabbath. And there is one more thing I want to name, because it appears often in this kind of loneliness and is rarely spoken out loud. It is the exhaustion of always being the one who cares. You spent decades being the person others turned to. The father who solved things, the mother who welcomed, the grandfather who had patience, the grandmother who had advice, the person who, when there was a problem in the family, was called, not necessarily to solve it, but to be present, to hold things together, to be the solid ground while others shook. That was beautiful. It was real. It was one of the most concrete forms of love that exist. But there is a cost no one talks about. The caregiver is rarely cared for in the same way, not because people do not care, but because they unconsciously assume that the one who has always been strong does not need as much, that the one who has always cared can manage alone, that the one who has always been the ground does not need the ground to be firm underneath them. And you kept learning not to contradict that assumption, because it feels like ingratitude, because it feels like weakness, because you learned that certain requests do not fit the role you always occupied. But tonight, in this room with this video, you do not have to keep that role. You can be the person who needs to be cared for. You can be the person who came with the question no one asked. You can be the person who is bent over, not from physical illness, but from this specific weight of someone who carried so much for so long that the posture changed inside, that posture of someone who learned to take up less space than they deserve. And the God who called that woman by name on an ordinary Sabbath is calling you now. Not when you are more put together, not when the loneliness has passed, not when you have managed to need less. Now, with the 7-minute call still echoing, with that space the size of an unasked question still in your chest, with the exhaustion of decades of caring without being cared for resting on your shoulders, now. And do you know what else? You do not need to sum all of this up in a beautiful sentence before coming before him. You do not need to organize your feelings. You do not need clarity about what exactly hurts the most. You do not need to turn your pain into an articulated request. You can come bent over. He has already seen you that way, and he already knows exactly what to say. In a moment, I want to pray with you, as if I were sitting there beside your chair, holding this night together with you, with that question no one asked, with the exhaustion of always being the one who holds things together, with the strange feeling of having been with people today and still arriving here with this weight. You are not going to carry this alone tonight. Lord, I come before you tonight with a heart that spent the whole day among people and that still arrived here carrying a loneliness that is hard even to name. It is not the loneliness of someone who has no one. It is the loneliness of someone who was present all day and still felt at some point that space the size of a question that never came. And I bring that heart before you now, just as it is, without organizing it, without summarizing it, without trying to make this pain seem smaller than it is. There is a person here. They are in this room now, maybe with the television already turned off, maybe with the house quiet around them, maybe with the phone resting on the table still holding the day's last conversation. And tonight, they are carrying something they spent their whole life learning not to mention, the feeling of not being asked. Lord, you know exactly what this person's day was like. You saw every moment when they listened attentively and were not listened to in the same way. You saw that phone call, that good conversation that ended too soon, that was entirely about the life of the one who called, that ended with an "I'll let you get some rest" that sounded like a door gently closing in the face of someone who still had things to say. You saw the second when they held the phone in their hand afterward, and you did not look at that second with indifference. If you can, take a deep breath now. Let the air come in slowly and out even more slowly, and say very softly, just for him to hear, "Lord, I am here, with everything that was not said today, and I need you to listen to me tonight." Father, I want to begin by naming the exhaustion, not the body's exhaustion, that one is already familiar, already has a name, already has medicine and a pillow and a bedtime. The other exhaustion, the exhaustion of someone who spent decades being the solid ground while others shook, of someone who was the person called when there was a problem, the person who held things together when there was a crisis, the person who listened when there was pain, and who learned over so much time doing that certain requests do not fit someone who has always been strong. That exhaustion is real, Lord, and you see it. May this person not have to maintain, not even for one moment of this prayer, the posture of someone who always managed on their own. May this room be the place where they can finally set down that weight, not with drama, not with collapse, but with the simple relief of someone who arrived in a place where they do not have to pretend they are fine when they are not completely fine. You do not need them to arrive put together. You saw them bent over and called them anyway. Lord, I want to pray about those conversations that end too quickly, those 7-minute phone calls that were good but left a space, those messages in the family group chat that this person answers with love but that rarely ask in return how they are doing. Truly, beyond the usual courtesy, I'm not asking you to punish anyone for this. The people they love are good people. They are busy. They are in the middle of their own stories, their own urgencies, their own lives that move with the speed life has when you are still in the middle of it. But the fact that they do not ask does not mean there is nothing to ask. Say that to this person's heart tonight, Lord, clearly, firmly, that the absence of the question is not a verdict on their value, that the space left after the call is not proof that there is not much to say, that the story they carry inside, decades of experience, of faith built in difficult places, of love given without keeping score, of wisdom that only comes from having gone through what they went through, that story has not lost its value just because the world around them is too busy to ask about it. You ask, Lord, not in passing, not out of routine. The way Jesus spoke to that bent-over woman, stopping everything, focusing, calling her by name, making the encounter impossible to confuse with anything else. May this person feel that tonight, not as a pretty idea, as a reality that settles on their chest with weight and warmth. Say with me now, very softly, I am someone God stops everything to see. Tonight, in this room, I am seen, I am heard. I am not scenery to him. Father, I want to pray about that moment of observing from a distance, that moment when the person is in a room with people, participating, smiling at the right times, and suddenly realizes they are one step behind glass, physically present but not fully reached, as if the center of things had shifted a little without warning, and they do not quite know when it happened or how to get back. May this person know tonight that there is a place where they are never behind glass. Here, before you. There is no glass between them and God. There is no formal distance, no line to be attended to, no moment when you are busy with something more important and they need to wait. You are the God who crosses the room to call the one in the corner, who sees before being called, who arrives before the request. That woman in the synagogue asked for nothing. And still Jesus saw her, called her, spoke directly to her, not because she had done something to deserve it, because she was there, and he saw her. You see this person in the same way tonight, with that same specific, unmistakable attention that is not the same as looking at a crowd and registering that they are in it. You see them. With this specific day, with this specific conversation that ended leaving a space, with this specific strange feeling in the chest that they brought into this room and that you already knew before they even opened this video. Place your hand over your heart now, gently. Feel your heart beating. And remember, this heart is known by God, not from a distance, not in a general way, but detail by detail, layer by layer, including the layers no one around you tonight got around to asking about. You know those layers, Lord, and you do not grow tired of them. Lord, I want to pray now against the lies this emotional loneliness whispers when the house grows quiet, because they come with a low voice, but they come, and they need to be named, so they lose the power they have. The lie that says that if no one asks, it is because there is not much to ask. That this person's inner story has already all been told, and no longer has anywhere to land. That the world has moved on to other conversations, and they were left one chapter behind. That certain feelings at this stage of life are too small to take up space, and that asking to be heard is a burden. Those lies are not your voice. They never were. Your voice calls by name. Your voice stops everything to see. Your voice is not in a hurry to hang up. Your voice is the only one in the world that does not need this person to summarize what they are feeling in a format that is easy to process, because you already know what is at the bottom, you have already seen what has not yet been said, and you are here exactly because of that. May that voice be louder tonight than any other, louder than the silence after the phone call, louder than that feeling of being one step behind glass, louder than the old habit of keeping inside what did not fit into any conversation during the day. Say now very slowly, I do not need to summarize what I feel in order to be heard by God. He already knows, and He is here. Breathe. Father, I want to pray about the legacy of care this person carries, because there is something emotional loneliness tries to erase that needs to be said clearly tonight. Decades of being solid ground for others were not wasted, just because now the world around them is too busy to ask how the ground itself is doing. Every time this person listened when they wanted to be heard, every time they held things together when they needed someone to hold them, every time they showed up when they were tired, every time they put others first without drama and without keeping count, all of that was seen by you. None of that was invisible to God. No act of care, no matter how small it seemed, went unnoticed. Not one time they swallowed their own exhaustion in order to be strong for someone happened outside your sight. You saw it all, and you keep it all. May this person be able to receive tonight what they rarely receive during the day, care in return. Not from a child who is busy, not from a grandchild who is not yet mature enough for that, not from a friend who is also in the middle of their own life. The care of a God who does not grow tired, who is not in a hurry, who does not have anything more important tonight than being here, in this room, with this person, with this specific loneliness they brought. Surround them now, Lord, with a presence they can feel, not as manufactured emotion, but as a reality that settles. May the room not feel empty. May the silence not feel like absence. May every second of this prayer undo layer by layer the posture of someone who learned to take up less space than they deserve. They deserve space. Before you, they always have. And about the future, about that day we all know will come, may there be no loneliness in that thought. Not the loneliness of someone who will depart without ever having been truly seen, because there is someone who has seen them, completely, inside and out, with the conversations that had room and with the ones that did not. with the feelings that were spoken, and with the ones that were kept for decades in a place no one ever asked about. When this person's last day here comes, may they arrive in your arms knowing they were known, not by the version of themselves the world saw, by the version you always saw. The complete, deep version, full of layers that deserve to be asked about and that you never stopped asking about. Until then, help them rest in that truth, one night at a time. May the last thought of this night not be that space the size of a question that never came. May it be this: God asked me tonight. God listened to me, and I can rest. If you can, take a deep breath one more time now, slowly. Let the air come in and out even more slowly, and say very softly, one last time, I choose to rest. I choose to trust that I am seen, not only by those who are near, but by the God who stops everything to see me. I receive your care tonight, and I rest. Surround this room with your peace, Lord. Not in a generic way, in a specific way. This room, this silence, this night, this person who came here carrying the whole day on their back and who deserves, truly deserves, to close their eyes, knowing they are not invisible. May the last thought of this night not be an unanswered question. May it be a certainty without noise. I was seen, I was heard, God was here. In Jesus' name, amen. If this prayer reached a place inside you that has been quiet for a long time, keep this video. Save it here on YouTube, because there will be other nights like this. Nights when the day will have been long, the phone call will have been short, and that strange feeling of being present but not really reached will return with the same weight as today. When that happens, you will not need to search. This prayer will be here, waiting for you, ready to sit with you again. And there is one thing I want to ask you before you close your eyes. While you were listening tonight, maybe a face came to your mind. Not someone distant, someone close. Maybe a friend who became a widow not long ago and who says she is doing fine when you see her, but you know that smile that covers more than it reveals. Maybe someone in a nursing home who receives fewer visits than they deserve. Someone who has decades of story inside and very few people who stop to ask about it. If that face came, do not ignore it. Send this video to that person. It does not need a long explanation. It does not need an elaborate message about loneliness and invisibility and everything we talked about here. Just an "I was thinking about you today" is enough. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not to fix. It is simply to let someone know they were remembered, that they are not scenery to someone who cares, that there is someone who stopped everything for a second just to think of them. That simple gesture may be, for someone tonight, exactly what this prayer was for you. In the next video, I want to keep praying with you, and the next step is natural, almost inevitable. Because after bringing into the light this loneliness of being present but not being reached, after letting God see you in this honest and quiet place, what usually appears next is another layer of the same pain, only in a different direction, no longer inward, but outward. The loneliness of looking around and realizing that the circle has been shrinking, that chairs that had names have become empty, that friends who were part of the fabric of your life have been drifting away, some because of physical distance, others in ways that hurt in a way that has no easy name. That is social loneliness, and it deserves to be brought before God with the same honesty we brought tonight. That is exactly what we are going to do together in the next video, so that peace does not stay only in this room, but goes with you into the days when the silence comes from outside, not only from within. Now rest. Close your eyes. You were not invisible tonight. You were seen by the God who stops everything to see you, by the same one who crossed a crowded synagogue to call a bent-over woman by name on an ordinary Sabbath. He called you tonight too, and you can rest.